The water was no longer a shimmering promise. It was a thief, swallowing the last of Mateo's strength as he clung to the rotting wood of his sinking boat. In that moment, with the weight of the gold coin sewn into his vest pulling him toward the dark silence of the ocean floor, he realized he had traded his life for a pile of yellow metal that couldn't breathe, couldn't swim, and couldn't love him back. Mateo had always been a man of the horizon. In the small coastal village where he was raised, the elders spoke of the sea as a mother, but Mateo saw it only as a vault. While others were content with the silver flash of a good haul of fish, Mateo's eyes were fixed on the stories of sunken galleons and lost treasures. He didn't want a comfortable life, he wanted a legendary one. His obsession became his shadow. He spent years mapping the temperamental currents and studying the way the light hit the reefs at low tide. He withdrew from the festivals and the shared meals under the stars. When his friend Elena offered him a seat at her table, he saw only lost hours that could be spent diving. When the village children laughed, he heard only the distracting noise that kept him from his calculations. He was building a kingdom in his mind, and there was no room for anyone else in it. The day he finally found the wreck, the sky was a bruised purple. Most sailors would have seen the warning in the clouds, the way the birds fled toward the shore in a frantic, silent wave. But Mateo only saw the glint of a heavy, encrusted chest wedged between two jagged fingers of coral. It took him hours of agonizing labor to haul the heavy prize onto his modest skiff. Every muscle in his body screamed, but the adrenaline of greed acted as a numbing balm. By the time the first coin touched his palm, the wind had turned into a howl. The storm didn't build, it exploded. The waves became mountains of obsidian, crashing down with a weight that splintered his oars. A rational man would have cast the gold overboard to lighten the load and gain the speed needed to outrun the surge. Mateo, however, did the opposite. He feared the sea would reclaim his prize, so he took a needle and heavy twine from his kit and began feverishly sewing the coins into the lining of his thick leather vest. He bound himself to his wealth, literally stitching his fate to the gold. Now, as the skiff vanished into the foam, Mateo was alone in the vast, churning heart of the storm. The shore was visible in the distance, a thin, gray line of hope. If he were unburdened, he was a strong enough swimmer to reach the calmer shallows, but the vest was a leaden shroud. Each time he kicked toward the surface, the gold pulled his shoulders back down. The very thing he'd spent his life chasing was now the anchor ensuring his end. He saw the faces of his life flash by, not as memories, but as missed opportunities. He saw Elena standing on the pier, her hand shaded over her eyes, looking for a boat that would never return. He realized that the gold of his life was the warmth of the sun on his back, the taste of fresh bread, and the sound of a friend's voice. He had ignored the true currency of existence to hoard cold, indifferent metal. The struggle was a slow, rhythmic torture. He tried to rip the vest off, but his fingers were numb from the cold, and the knots he had tied in his greed were too tight, too perfect. He had secured his treasure so well that he had locked himself inside his own grave. He fought the waves until his lungs felt like they were filled with crushed glass. The salt burned his eyes, but the sting of regret was sharper. As the sun began to set, casting a bloody red glow over the turbulent water, Mateo's movement slowed. The frantic splashing turned into a heavy, rhythmic bobbing. He stopped fighting the ocean and began to look at it. He saw the beauty he had missed, the terrifying power of the current, the vastness of the world that didn't care about his riches. He thought of the village treasury where this gold was meant to sit. It would be beautiful in a vault, but it was useless in a storm. He had spent his youth, his health, and his relationships to acquire something that was currently killing him. He was the richest man in the graveyard of the sea. With one final lung-bursting effort, he reached for a floating piece of the ship's mast. His fingertips brushed the wood, but the weight of the gold was absolute. It was a physical manifestation of his choices. The wood drifted away, carried by a current he was too heavy to follow. The water rose over his chin. He took one last look at the distant, fading shoreline. He didn't see the gold anymore. He only saw the light. He closed his eyes, the silence of the deep finally rising to meet him, realizing too late that he had spent his whole life preparing for a future that his greed would never let him reach. The ocean became still long after the storm passed, leaving no trace of the man or his treasure. The gold remained at the bottom, glittering in the dark where no one could see it, weighing nothing to the sea, but everything to the man who chose it over the air. True wealth is only measured by what you can carry through a storm.